So I'm Courtney Lou. I live in the Swan Valley in Western Australia, which is just a beautiful little community of artists and artisans and just beautiful people. And unlike most people in the Swan Valley, I wasn't born here. So the Swan Valley is full of very old families and just beautiful kind of community connections, but it can be very hard to break into the Swan Valley. I've been somehow very lucky that I just kind of ended up here when I was 17. I left home and started working in the valley, and no one has ever asked me where I came from. They just assume I'm from here, which is super, super lovely. So when I'm not being a Swan Valley person and all the things that that embodies, I'm a writer, a horse trainer, a relationship studies student, and a chef. So all of those things my whole life have felt very fragmented. Like it's felt like, I either have to be a horse person or a writer or a chef or a student. And I've never understood why I have these 4 different interests or different skills that kind of pull me in all these different directions. And I'm always traveling and always teaching and working different events and doing different things. But, I've always felt like I've had to pick one of the 4 to pursue. And it's been quite hard because all of them kind of fill up a space in me that will offer me a space to express part of myself. And it's only recently that I've realized it's actually all an expression of the same thing. I don't actually have to fragment myself off into all these different directions. I think I've only recently come to realize that all I do is an expression of love and compassion. And so in, training a horse or working with a horse, that is actually just an expression of love and compassion. And in creating food for somebody, that's just another way that I can express love and compassion. And in my work as a writer, all I do is kind of burrow into the mind of somebody else and see the world from their perspective, which again is just expressing love and compassion. And I think what I've realized is that I can do that and I can be, an advocate for just living a compassionate life through focusing on all these different things. And it's kind of having 4 different stages to present the same message. And that's something that I'm really enjoying. And it can be challenging, especially as a horse trainer, when people ask me, to present to them like a specific skill set, or they want to know what techniques I use to get the results that I get with my wonderful horses. And there's actually not really a defined skill set or strategy or system. All I'm ever doing with a horse is just looking at them, observing them, and kind of loving them, and but loving them in a way that is how they want to be loved. So I think when we think of love, we think of like what it feels for us to love something and that feeling. But most times love should be more defined as what you can do for, not what it feels for us, but what you can do and how you can actively love something. And sometimes it doesn't match up with the feeling that we have. So to actively love a horse is to be with a horse in a way that really honors what they need in that moment, and not so much what we need from that interaction. So that can be a very challenging thing to explain to people, especially on a stage where in the horse world it's very like male dominated, and a lot of my peers are men who have very it's just the way men work. They have very pragmatic approaches to things. That's very they create systems, and they have these very kind of clear frameworks to work through. And then I'm kind of working in the same areas, and we have the same clients, and I don't really offer that do A to arrive at B. It's more of a just like be with your horse, try and see the world through their eyes and understand how would they best like to learn this skill. Not how would you best like to teach it, but how would they best like to learn it. And so the similar feeling or the similar kind of theme exists within everything that I do with food and everything that I do with writing as well. It's just, nourishing the other as an expression of actively loving them. I was saying earlier, everything was very fragmented, and I always felt like I had to pick a piece. When the psychology degree wasn't what I had envisioned, I just threw myself into the world of horses and pursued that professionally, which was wonderful, and it was such a fun time. And I really had to put myself out there because naturally I'm quite shy. So to go and teach, 40 people at a time, 40 strangers and their horses and do all of this, I would find that quite challenging, but it would also really give me such a rush when I was finished. But it still wasn't everything that I wanted it to be. I still felt like, at the end of the day, I would still be wondering about the mind of the person and still just be trying to look at that dynamic in another way, the dynamic between horse and human. And that would be the thing that I would really fixate on and want to know more about. So the relationship studies and how this has kind of come through, that's just been an extension of what I do with horses and humans. So when I meet a horse and human, I have a moment to assess the horse and to assess the human, and then to have a look at how that dynamic works together and see what does each being need from this. Like, what are they currently bringing to the table, and what do they need? And it's not so much about how they interact together, but just like each is separate meeting and, how is this all playing out, which I thought for a very long time was something that I could just do with horses and humans. And I don't know why, but it's only now the penny dropped where I thought like, oh, I can also do this with like human and human. And it's exactly the same, actually. It's just an extension of that. So I feel like through my studies now I have an opportunity to bring, what I've been doing for a decade with horses and humans into this place of connecting humans with humans. And perhaps 10 years ago I wasn't ready to do that. I didn't have a load of life experience when it comes to interacting with people, and I've always had more of an affinity with horses. I was shaped by some very early childhood experiences that have helped me absolutely understand what it is to be a flight animal or to be a prey. So I've always had this innate understanding of how horses are, and perhaps it's taken me the better part of my adult life to understand more about how humans are, and now I'm in a better position to bring that decade of learning and observing through horse-human relationships into human-human connection, which I think is very important. And I kind of see it in this kind of triangular way of, like, I've had the horses and humans experience. I'm shifting into the human and human experience, but through food, that was very much about like self-connection. So, horses offer me a chance to connect almost, it feels like at times, to the universe. Like when you can convey an idea to another animal without any verbal language, or, if you can share an idea, that's a pretty magical place to be in. When I shift into the food part, it's connecting to self. So that offers me these moments to help myself and help others just connect to what they need and how they want to be nourished, and, using the relationship with food to facilitate a change in, your relationship with yourself. So yeah, I can see now, actually, it's all very much the same thing. I'm just shifting it into kind of different contexts, this idea of connecting, compassion, and actively loving, as I described before. Yeah. And it is quite amazing. Like when I meet a horse and a human, the human automatically kind of assumes this role of, I think they don't mean it in such an aggressive way, like how it sounds, but they assume this role of needing to dictate to the horse, and the time spent with the horse is then a series of the human telling the horse like how he or she needs to interact with them or behave. And yeah, I've often wondered about like how would I describe my like training sessions with horses, because I can't shy away from the fact that like my horses are exceptional, and their skill set is just, particularly one horse that I have in my life, like he I've only had him for 2 years, so I haven't had him very long at all. And I got him well, I was asked if I would train him for his owner, and she hoped to sell him on, and I said, no, it's not really what I do. Like I really, I can't offer that service for you. And then she was kind of still there for about 6 months in the background, asking me like, this horse is very naughty, like I would really love some help. And I'm sorry, that's not what I do. And in the end, she offered him to me at a ridiculously low price, and I agreed. And I had never met him, and I went to pick him up, and he was a lot smaller than I was hoping he would be, but he was dragging her down the driveway, and he kind of shoved his nose in my face, and he was like, are you here for me? I was like, yeah, I guess I am. And I saw him, and I thought, this horse is exceptional. So a lot of people have been watching my journey with him over the last 2 years, and he's gone from being this like I remember messaging his owner saying, it feels like Christmas, I'm so happy, thank you for giving me this opportunity to have this horse. And she just wrote like, no, he's so stubborn and he never tries, I'm just glad that he's going. And I thought, oh Jesus, like what have I got here? So anyway, so that was how he was kind of pigeonholed before I got him. He was this naughty, stubborn, obtuse little pony, and now he's with me, and we just have the best time. And prior to having him, I thought I had kind of reached the summit of what I could convey to a horse and what I could have them understand. And he's blown all of that just out of the universe, I guess. Like the things that he will understand and do with me are just, I never ever thought that it was possible to have a horse do these things. And he's allowed my imagination to run wild. So just things that like I ride him without any ropes or any equipment at all, and he can understand incredibly dynamic moves and things that horses just don't naturally do. Like I can ride him with no ropes into a lay down position, and then he'll get up and sit and just let me kind of slide off. And so I've thought about the last 2 years and when have I actively trained him? So like, how does he know this? And people want to know that, my audience and the people who watch my journey with him, they want to know like, well, what does a training session look like for you? And actually my horses and I are never in training, but we're also never out of. So I don't have a different way of being with them at any moment. I'm not with them kind of dictating what they need to do or anything like this, but they just show up, and I can walk out into the field and they'll come over, and I'll know, if he's in a particularly playful mood, then we'll play, and through that play there is incidental learning and opportunities to be in dialogue, and it's more of that. It's more of a dialogue, I think. And I'm very lucky to have just organically arrived at that place with horses, to just know that that's possible and that can exist, and then kind of show that to people that we don't have to just go into the paddock and love our horses in that context, but then go into an arena and now we can only dictate and be quite clinical and things like this. So and it's that which I've learned with horses that I hope I can bring to people in the context of couples therapy or family therapy, and just kind of help people understand that you can be in that connected space always. Like you don't have to have a face of like, well, here I am as mother, and here I am as wife, or here I am as partner, and that is kind of a mask or a role. Like we can just show up and be all of us and connect in that way. And sometimes I do get concerned for, you know, how kind of social narratives are shaping the way people do interact with each other and kind of creating very clearly defined roles that we have to fit into, and it only allows for a very superficial connection or meeting of people. And I think now 10 years of professional horsemanship has showed me that that's just not fulfilling, and that's not all that there is. That I can interact, you know, for example, with my mum or my nana as more than just, you know, daughter or granddaughter. Like I can be my entirety and love their entirety outside of the role. Yeah, we just compartmentalize and fraction ourselves out and feel like part of me will exist here, and we say part of me will exist here. And I've come to notice over the last 10 years, I suppose, I'm not any different in any different context. I don't, you know, people have described to me like, how is it, you know, that you would move through putting on like your horsemanship hat, and then, you know, you put your chef hat on, and then you know, go and be a student, or, you know, sit down and become a writer. And I think I don't feel any different in any of those places. Like I'm exactly the same. So perhaps on the outside it looks like this fractioning out, but for me, I am exactly the same person when I'm writing, when I'm creating food, when I'm studying relationships, or when I'm studying horses. There's not only, you know, a part of me that exists in those places, like my entirety exists in those places. And like I mentioned earlier, it's those four things have allowed me to understand actually who I really am, because I'm showing up in these places as the same person. Well, what I really am then is just this advocacy, for lack of a better word, just this advocacy for compassion and understanding what compassion and kindness is. And how I said before about actively loving, it's not so much about how we feel, but being actively compassionate and kind in these four facets of my life is just sitting back and seeing the world from someone else's perspective and understanding how I need to be to connect with that person or place. There are a lot of times when I think about this, like how would I help someone, you know, actively connect with their world, or you know, what can we do to make the world more connected? When sometimes I work at a cafe and I have to, you know, interact with customers all the time, and I've started just adopting this idea of being absolutely honest. So if I feel this thing like burning inside of me that I want to say to a person, like, you know, I love your outfit, or you have the cutest shoes I've ever seen, or you know, there's a particular lady who comes in, she's just loud and Irish, you know, loud and Irish, they kind of go together, and she's just she's a beautiful person. And I felt like this for a long time, like, oh, this woman is just such a beautiful person. So I told her, and it's things like that where, you know, it feels kind of strange at first to approach her and say, you know what, Cass, you're just such a beautiful person, and I love that you come in every day. But in telling her that, you know, we just had that moment to connect outside of the framework of, you know, customer, chef, whatever, and just see each other as absolutely. And you know, to express myself took a lot of courage, but I could feel that, like, as soon as that happened, that wound just healed right up. The grazing went away. You know, as soon as I just verbalized, like, this is how I feel, it's like all that resentment that was kind of building, that, you know, one day might just, you know, explode, that just dissipated. It was gone. And yeah, it does take a lot of courage to just put that out there. And I think especially, or maybe not, I'm not sure if it's especially as an introvert or especially as a woman or especially as, you know, fill in the blank, but it feels like it's quite easy to just put aside, you know, how you're feeling, or because you can just, step into a role that makes it okay, and, don't worry about it, or you can, be compassionate to a point of also just forgetting what you really need. But that courage muscle that you're talking about, when we can exercise that, it just opens up the opportunity for connections. And if they don't exist, they won't happen. And if they do, you can just find them in such a strong way. That kind of breaks down in the other person, this feeling like they need to, also be perfect, or, we can kind of get into some funny games of, well, I'm very stoic and resilient, and like I have my life together. And so the person you're talking with feels also like they need to possess this idea of being stoic and resilient and having everything together. And there's no benefit to that. Like, we can't help each other when we're, pretending. So for her, and she wasn't requiring anything from me. She wasn't asking advice. She wasn't anything. She was just like, this is how I am right now, and this is my story, and this is me. And it was almost like a quiet question of like, if you would love me, this is me. And so I do, and I have kind of carried that quiet question in my own mind of late, with my horses or with people I meet, new colleagues, whatever. It's like, or new friends, if you would love me, this is me. Like, I want you to love this, not who you want me to be, or who you think I could be, or who you need me to be. But if I show up to you as I am, this is me, this is what's available to love. And I would feel loved if this was recognized, and I could also love you if you knew who I was.